What's up, guys? Welcome to the Wisdom of Coaches podcast presented by the Legacy Track Club. Coach Rabo here, along with Coach Falting. As always, we have a couple of great things to talk to you guys about today. But Falting, how are you doing?
I'm a little road weary. Just got back from a trip to Vanderbilt to watch my son race in a college indoor meet. And so we left on Thursday, broke up the drive, watched him race two races in 2 days, and then went and hung out with him at Arkansas State in Jonesboro for a day. And so literally just got back about an hour ago. So definitely a little worn out, but very, very excited to be on this podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. Nashville, that's what, like probably 12-hour drive all told?
So yeah, a little bit close to 11, but
Okay.
I mean, it's not too bad. It's all interstate for us and stuff, but it definitely adds up.
Yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a long day, even if you break that up into a couple of days like you guys did. It's a good bit of time on the road. So, the funny part is you had the weekend off from indoor coaching duties where you're typically having to travel 8 hours in the day, and then you turned around and you went and traveled anyway. So.
Yeah, the indoor track season, I guess, is busy any way you shake a stick at it. But I will say, driving from Nashville to A State on Sunday gave me plenty of time to watch our most recent marathoner do her performance. And so I let my wife drive, and I sat and pulled up the Flow Track app on my phone and was captivated for a little bit, less than 3 hours of watching. But it was an exciting time. It was definitely one way to make the drive go by a whole lot faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who may not have been aware, we had our third marathon in less than a month. We had, of course, Brett Bouillon ran the Louisiana Marathon, MLK weekend in January. I ran the Mesa Marathon last weekend in Arizona, and this weekend, Alison Wells took part in the Austin Marathon in Austin, Texas. And so hers is a little different from mine and Brett's. Allison was in the elite field, so she was going in and representing us in a whole different kind of way. And as Coach Falting mentioned, since it was in Austin, Texas, which is the home base of Flow Track. Flow Track did live coverage of the race, which was very interesting. It was a decent sized marathon, I think, all told between the marathon half and 5K. There's a little over 20,000 participants, but not really one that you would normally probably have a camera crew at if it weren't for the fact that it's in FlowTrack's home turf. So there was a live stream. I didn't have to worry about doing it while driving, but I did set an alarm and woke up at 6 a.m. Mountain time to tune in so I could to watch the race, and it was some pretty good stuff, which we'll be getting into here. So, um, Faulty, why don't you give us a little bit of background on Allison's kind of journey with? I mean, we can go back even to high school, but definitely, when she got started on Legacy Track Club and kind of going from there.
Yeah, so I've had the privilege of coaching Allison since she was a freshman in high school. She, let's see, joined Parkway High School in 2010 and was second in cross country at the state meet that year. I got to coach her for all 4 years of high school, and I believe she won 5 state titles across cross country, track, and indoor track. And then graduated. She went to run for the University of Alabama, and it was always kind of our intention that I would coach her again when she got done, being a collegiate runner. And she got done being a collegiate runner and called me up, and the entire experiment lasted about 2 weeks. And then she said, "Coach, I'm just tired of running." you know, and I said, "Look, I understand. No hard feelings. We still love you. If you ever get the bug again, let me know." And so I guess about 4 years later, she had had a child, had gone, 4 years without running, kind of got the bug. And so she called and said, "Hey, I'm ready." And so we actually started the Legacy Track Club with her and another one of my former runners, Hayden Kingfisher, and I trained her for about 6 months, and she went and ran a marathon in either Georgia or Florida. And we had no expectations for that one at all. We were hoping maybe she could qualify for Boston. For her, it was going to be a 3 hour and 30-minute time to qualify for her age group. For the men's age group, it was 3 hours to qualify, and she ended up running 2 hours and 58 minutes. So she would have qualified as a male at the time, which was insane. And then we decided we were going to train through Boston, and we got to training. She had like a little hip injury that kind of made training pretty tough, really close to Boston. And we talked, and I was like, "Look, what are your goals? Do you want to just go celebrate running at Boston, or do you want to like try to do something?" And she goes, "Coach, I think I want to have another baby. So I think Boston's going to be my last marathon for a little while. So I want a PR." And I thought, who the crap PRs at Boston? So with the hip pain, and the goal, and about 6 weeks of training left, we kind of pivoted our training. We did some things that definitely kept the hip a little bit more comfortable. And she went to Boston and ran 2 hours and 48 minutes. So you start to realize that, who knows what the heck this kid can do. And so then Allison, took another break, had a little baby girl, and took some time off. And then she called me about 6 months ago and said, "Hey, I'm ready to do this again. I want to do the Austin Marathon in February, and let's jump back on this and stuff." And so we did, and we've been training. Trainings looked really, really well until about 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, Montezuma's Revenge hit the Wells house, and so our last big long run that we were going to do just kind of got thrown to the side. So she actually did not do a long run like in the 20s. No 20-miler plus long runs in this build up to this race. So we were a little bit nervous about it. She did get into the elite field at Austin, even though she only had one race that had met the elite time, and they were looking for a few races to do it. But they gave her a shot, and we talked about some goals and some things to kind of go after. And yeah, lo and behold, she gets out there and is the first Legacy Track Club runner to, I guess, be a professional runner. I mean, she got in the money with her second place finish overall, ran 2:44, which I think is what 6:18 pace for the whole thing, and just incredible, And then to add on top of that, just the perfect icing, she was a media darling there, and so she got some really good interviews and some really good feedback from people from Flow Track and stuff. So it was absolutely amazing. We're just screaming at my phone the whole time we're driving down and stuff. But it was a really, really cool experience, and we have a long-term goal of getting to the Olympic trials in 2028. And it's just weird. Like every time she runs, it doesn't matter how long she's taken off. It doesn't matter what challenges are thrown at her. We just keep getting really, really close to seeing that goal come to fruition. So it's
Yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, a lot to talk about there. I know, one of the first things you said was, she tried to continue training after college and was like, no, I got to take some time off. And it's really funny. I was on the Manitou Incline yesterday, me and a coworker trying to do it once a month, and so we were knocking out our February incline. And he ran for NAIA school. Actually, Olivet Nazarene was a steeplechase guy and some other things, and he's very fast 5K guy. He's done some good marathons, but we kind of laugh because he runs 3 days a week. He goes out and he'll do 5 miles in under 35 minutes, and that's all he runs. And it's good enough to kind of keep him in shape. But that's one of the things he always says is, I did 4 years of college, and I like put in so much work and so much time and so much effort, and coming out of that, it's very difficult. And that's something I've seen with some of my own friends. Good friend Alan Sticker, David Monroe. Alan ran at LSU, David at Louisiana Tech, and both of them kind of like I was like picking up running after college, and they were just both like, I'm a little over it. And then I think finally, like, just both of them lived with me for a time, and I kind of got them back into it. But I think that's definitely something that's very common with college runners. Is just putting in so much work over 4 years and just the countless miles, I think a lot of times it becomes work, and it becomes not quite as fun as it once was. And so sometimes you have to take a little bit of time to kind of rediscover that joy of running. And I definitely think that Allison's probably really found that again.
Yeah.
Um,
I do think too that it kind of comes down to, one of the things that we're doing with this Legacy Track Club is offering a coaching service, but we're really tailoring it to the athletes,
yeah.
like it's not that there's one recipe for everybody. And one of the most stressful things for Allison coming out of college was just 4 years of living everything by like a pace.
Hmm.
Like they had a pace for cool downs, they had a pace for warm ups. They had a pace for every workout that they did. And granted, I mean, the University of Alabama, that's a highly successful collegiate program. So it's not like we're criticizing that. But when you're governed by the watch for so long, sometimes you just need a breather from that. And, the ironic thing is when you see a lot of Allison's marathon training, it's really open ended. There's not a lot of pace discussions before the workouts. After the workouts, it's constantly surprising. You'll tell her like, she'll call and be like, "Coach, I think I overdid it." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "I mean, I feel great, but I closed my last mile in like 5:35." And you're like, "What in the world?" and stuff. But with her and the mentality now, if I'd have said, close your last mile in 5:35, that might have been a difficult workout. But leaving it to where she's no longer governed by that and just gets to race by feel and feel good about it, you get those kind of things coming up in her training. So it's really neat to
What
see.
And I think that's one of the fun things. And I know I've experienced this, and I'd be interested in hear your take because you have more team coaching experience than I do. But a lot of times I talk to people, and coaching an individual is, I don't want to say easy because there's definitely still like a lot of trial and error and a lot of figure things out. But it can be a lot easier than coaching a team, and I think a lot more fun a lot of times because with an individual, you just have so much more freedom. In my own training, for instance, if a Tuesday rolls around and I have a workout schedule and I'm just like, like I'm not having a good day. I'm not feeling it. I can bump it a day or two if I need to. And that's pretty easy to do because it's only affecting one person. It's only affecting me. But when you have the team dynamic, and this is I think a lot of times with the coaching and where people are so regimented, like you have to develop a plan. Obviously there is some wiggle room for individuals within the team, but most of it is this is what the team is doing. This is, the warm up the team's doing. This is the workout the team's doing. This is the cool down the team's doing. This is the mileage the team's doing. And you're going to make tweaks. I think any good coach is going to make tweaks to that, especially if you're in your case coaching, for, age groups of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, or if you're in college and doing the same. But there's not quite as much flexibility. It's not like I can give half the cross country team, all right, you guys are going to go do this workout, and the other half are going to do this workout. And I know, a lot of times in track, you can break it up and, kind of your mid distance guys, your long distance guys or girls and things like that. But I definitely think coaching Allison individually, you get to have a lot more flexibility and she gets to have a lot more fun than it would be in a team environment where you're a little bit more constricted by the fact that you have to do what's best for 20 to 50 individuals at any given time.
Right. And I try to individualize training a significant amount, but at the end of the
Hmm.
day, if we're at a specific location, you're kind of limited to how many different things you can do with your athletes there. And I will say when I'm coaching, my high school team, that the priorities are decisions that are best for the program, then that year's team, and then the individual. Whereas when I'm coaching a singular marathoner, the decisions are what's best for the individual,
Right.
um, and so it is different, like it's funny that, when Allison first started training, if she got sick or had a bad day, she's like apologizing, like, "Oh, coach, I'm so sorry," or whatever. And I'm like, "Oh, it's different. There's not a state championship race coming up in 2 weeks that we got to, hit everything
Right.
perfect. Like we're on your
Yep.
schedule now. I'm training you for us to find the window that's going to work best for you." And so it is different. It's a lot less, stressful in the day to day. No matter how long I've coached, it's still stressful on race day. I mean,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I was white knuckle, and I'm watching as I don't want to say barely a coach, but as a casual fan, that we'll get in a little bit. I've talked to her before a couple of her races. She you always like, hey, Allison wants to talk to you. And I'm like, why? Like, that was the next thing I was actually going to read. Before you were talking about her first marathon, I just remember, she kind of sprung it on you a little bit. Like I think you were training her more 5K, 10K, and she was just kind of like, hey, like I want to qualify for Boston this year, and it was like, oh, okay, well, let's like completely revamp this, and so I had, I knew she needed to run 3:30. There was zero doubt in my mind that she was going to run 3:30. That was never even a question. But I do know, like getting close to it, you were like, "Hey, she wants to call you and talk to you about a couple of things." And so I was like, "All right, well, here's what I'm going to say. Is that line up with what you are, because with you being her main coach, I don't want to be like, "Hey, go do this," and like you had told her like the complete opposite. But I do remember she called me and, she was asking me a few little questions about just kind of leading up to it, day before, day of, and things like that. And she's like, well, you've done some of this and just get a little bit of your feedback. And I was like, yeah. And she goes, kind of paused for a second. And she's like, am I crazy to think that I could go under 3 hours for this one? And I was just like, Allison, like looking at all your workouts, if I was doing that, I'd be going for under 3 hours. I was like, so I don't think you're crazy at all. I was like, so they're going to have a 3 hour pace group. And she was like, yeah. And I was like, I mean, I always like to start my marathons out a little bit slower than like my goal pace just to kind of get a little bit of chance to ease into it. So, I think start off easy, catch up to that 3 hour pace group and just hold on. And then whenever you're feeling good. And I remember talking to her after that where she was running next to the pacer and she was kind of like, when do I like go if I'm feeling good, leave you guys. And he was like, just wait till like 24 or so. And so I think she just kind of held on. And this was like, first marathon, she didn't have super shoes. She didn't have any of that. She was just out there. I think it's some trainers running.
Yeah,
And
some
so,
basic ASICs.
yeah, yeah. And went
Basic.
ran 2:58. And yeah, did an amazing job. And so I was, that was great. And then yeah, Boston, just kind of not a historically easy course. And that was one of the things where she just kind of was able to keep running and catching people and catching people and catching people. And so ran a fantastic time there. And I was just like, man, like that's gonna be tough to top coming back into this next race. And so we talked Saturday before the race. She wanted to call and chat with me a little bit, and so she was asking me. Falting had talked to me a little bit earlier in the week, and you were like, "Hey, she's asking some questions about the course and kind of listen to this podcast where the guy goes into it." And so I was immediately like, "Send me the podcast!" Like, and so I listened to it at work on Friday, and so I had a little break, and so I was pulling up people's Stravas from the Austin Marathon and pulling up the Austin Marathon course, and just kind of digging in and doing a little bit of research on it. And I'd already pulled up results and took a look at last year, just kind of like trying to figure out because I knew she would probably want to chat a little bit, and so discussing pacing a little bit with her. And I was like, man, 2:38 won the women's race last year. I was like, and I didn't know at the time what you guys were shooting for. She told me y'all were going for sub 2:45 was kind of the goal. And so I was like, 2:38, like, man, she's going to be in the mix. Like, she could probably be sitting around third or fourth and, maybe have a shot to go in and get on the podium in this thing. And so I kind of chatted with her about that a little bit. And I told her, I was like, the hardest part about this is going to be like, you're just going to be by yourself for a good bit. I feel like, Boston, you had a ton of people. It's just such a huge race. There's a lot of people in front of you. You got to catch people. I was like, so just mentally be prepared. And she already had, a lot of good insight. The half marathoners on this race actually turn off at 12 miles, which I experienced the same thing in Houston. And it's kind of like an eerie feeling because you're running with like 100 people. And then 10 seconds later, it's like you and 10 people because like all these people pull off. And so and in her case especially, she was I think about 2.5 3 minutes behind the leader at that point. And so it was kind of just the occasional guy who was running the marathon who was maybe coming back to her or who may have been kind of moving past her, which there probably wasn't a ton of them that were doing that. And so that was one of the things that we talked about last week in the podcast when you're marathon training is I think it's very important to do some long runs by yourself, to do some hard workouts by yourself and just kind of feel what it's like to have to push and be alone a little bit because this was a huge race. And, she found herself probably for long stretches just running by herself and having to be okay with that. And if you've never done that and you're not expecting it, it can be difficult. But she had zero problems, and she put it together. Like you said, I was white knuckle. I was watching that. My wife and I are just sitting on the couch watching this live stream, and what a cool experience it was to be able to do that. They didn't show Allison too much. It was kind of funny, and I'm going to throw a little bit of shade at FlowTrack on this. They'll never see this, but I
I know
hope
where
they
you're
do.
going.
The majority of the race was featured on the men, which for the beginning of the marathon I understood because they had a group of probably 6 or 8 guys that were out front, that were going for it, that were battling, and then the women's race kind of got strung out, like we said, where the eventual winner, Janet something, I can't exactly remember her name, was 3 minutes in front of Allison. Allison was 3 minutes in front of the next person, and so they would occasionally go in and show Janet. But otherwise, it was just the men's race, and that was fine. Again, it was a race; it was a big pack. So they finish. You have the first place guy comes in, second place guy comes in, third place guy comes in, fourth place guy comes in, and they interview. I think first, second, and fourth for sure. In the half, they interviewed first, second, and third males. Interviewed a couple of the first and second place half winners. Interviewed Jenny Simpson, who was just there on the fun run with her husband. And so finally they cut back, and so they're showing the women's lead over her last probably 6 miles. And me and my wife were chatting. I was like, well, I doubt they have a camera back on Alice, and they probably just have a camera on the leader of the race. I was like, so I get what they're not going to show that. And so the women's winner came in 240, I think, 240 and some change. And so, I had my phone ready. We were watching on TV, but I have a screen recording app on my phone, and I was like, well, I'll just pull up the live stream on that and record it. It'll be a lot easier. And so, waited until like 2:42, knew Allison was going to be coming in, and so like I hit record, and then they were like, all right, we're going to cut and talk to the sponsor of the Austin Marathon. And so they start chatting with this guy, and I'm like, okay, cool. We'll cut away and show Allison finishing, and we're watching, and then you just hear in the background, now finishing second place for the women, Alison Wells. And I was like, you have to be freaking kidding me. And about that time you text me and you're like, I can't believe these guys cut away to this interview and did not show Allison finishing. And then what killed me was they did a split screen,
Yes.
and they had the interview, and then they're just showing like the half marathoners coming in. I'm like, y'all could have done this the whole time. You could have split screened this and showed us the second place female finishing. And so that was very frustrating. Luckily, they did immediately grab Allison and pull her in for an interview, which was kind of interesting because they didn't interview the first place finisher. I'm wondering, I know she was East African, so I'm wondering if there may have been a language barrier there if she didn't speak English very well and they didn't have a translator. Or maybe she just didn't want to do an interview. But we did get the capture of the Allison interview, which was extremely cool to see. It was so funny just seeing her on there with the sunglasses and the headband and the space blanket. I was just like, man, looks just like This looks like they're interviewing Kira D'Amato or Emma
Yeah, yeah.
Bates or Sarah. I mean, it looks just legit, and so that was a pretty cool experience. But FlowTrack, if you ever hear this, like, come on, guys, like, y'all got, we complain every year, and I'm sure a lot of fans do, like the Olympics, where they'll like shoot the gun off for the mile or the 1500, and they'll go like one lap, and they're like, all right, we're gonna cut away to commercial, and you're like, what? Why are you cutting away? It's a 4-minute rate, not even. So one of the many frustrations. But yeah, the fact that they split screened it afterwards, I was just kind of like, these guys, come on, man.
Well, I laughed at a bunch of it and stuff. It was entertaining, but years and years ago, I took the high school team when Allison was a senior to the Chili Pepper Cross Country Festival at the University of Arkansas, and it was arguably the worst weather conditions that we ever raced in. And Allison's dad saw how crazy the conditions were, so he left and went to like the local Walmart, and he came back, and it looked like he came back with tinfoil. And I'm like, what the heck is this? And he's like, these are space blankets. They're going to keep the team warm. And I was like, these are the most useless things I've ever heard of. And so the kids are bundled up in these space blankets while, I mean, it's just lightning and thunder and pouring rain, and our tent is like leaking. And it was just like by the end of this, I was like, these are the dumbest things ever. And so when I saw Allison on the TV with the space blanket, I texted her real quick. I was like, "Hey, tell your dad the space blankets finally came in handy."
Oh, that's and
So,
for those of you who've never been to Chili Pepper, it's like you have to take a bus from the parking lot to the race. Like there's not like so you guys are just stranded in this thunderstorm,
oh
I'm
yeah.
assuming.
Oh, it was a nightmare, but so much of a nightmare that it's one of the top ranked races in the country, and I've refused to go back. Now going on year 12 of not returning to
Yeah.
that race,
Yeah.
but no, it was you mentioned the podcast. Allison had sent me the podcast, and I listened to it. And my one thing I sent her before the race, and she actually kind of quoted some thoughts from there during her interview. But I said, look, I listened to this whole podcast. I said, it really feels like this guy is taking hills and turning these hills into mountains, the way he's describing this course. And I said, you just need to remember, that when you were in high school, we went and ran a literal mountain. We ran the Sunset Trail in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I took the team there. We had like 9 guys and 2 girls that completed the whole trail. It was 9 miles up and down a mountain. I tried to walk up the mountain and gave up. uh, 9 years later, I took another group of people up there. I again tried to hike the mountain and failed miserably. And then in 2020, I decided to actually go hike a mountain a month, and my goal was in December I was going to go back to the Sunset Trail, and that was going to be like the swan song of this whole endeavor. Was I was going to do a mountain every month and then go destroy this Sunset Trail. And instead, in April, I felt strong enough to go ahead and go and do it. And when I got to the top of it, I really like looked back down it and thought, why did I give up on this so many times? Like this isn't as big as my brain had made this. And so I just sent it to her and I said, just make sure you don't turn hills into mountains, when you go through this. Now, watching the live stream, that last hill in the last half mile was definitively a mountain. I don't know what jerks designed this course at Austin, but my God, they want you to. And when Allison called, that's the first thing she said. She said, "Coach, I almost walked up that last hill." She goes, "But I didn't know where the third place girl was, and it would have cost me $500 if that girl had caught me." So she goes, "I just figured I might as well hurt and go up it. And I will say this: the one thing I got out of that podcast, I'm gonna take with me for coaching for the rest of my career was the guy who was doing the description of the race course. At one point, said a quote, and he said, you can either choose courage or comfort, but not both."
Yeah.
And I thought, man, that's genius. And she got to that last hill, and chose courage over that. Comfort would have just been walking up it. Courage was get your butt up there, and see what happens. Don't get caught. And so it was real exciting. And then she brought up in her interview a quote that we've said for a long time now, that it's like, the climb may be hard, but think of the view from the top. And the view from the top of this one was pretty freaking sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. That was we talked about last week, and one of the things that I was, going through my head as I was kind of finishing that Mesa Marathon was, you're not going to get a sub 3 hour race and not hurt. And I think that's the same ethos of like, comfort, courage, and 100%. That's one of those things where it's like setting an audacious goal or setting, something that you really want to go after. If it turns out it was easy, you probably didn't make it hard enough,
Right.
and so I definitely think that, for her, that was just an insane race. I mean, that was not an easy course, and I was looking at the elevation profile on it. I was like, this is going to be a lot like Boston. The difference is you're not going to have as many people as you had at Boston to work with. And yeah, she just really crushed it. I know the beginning there was like a 3 mile climb. And I know that was one thing she talked about. And, I told her, I was like, honestly, I like that because it forces you to slow down a little bit. Like, I think a lot of people at the beginning of a race, you get caught up, you get the nerves, you get like, just caught up in the excitement. And it's very easy to be like, all right, I want to run 6:30 pace. And then you look down and you went out at 6:18 pace and you're like, oh God, like this is not good. And I was like, you got a nice little 3 mile uphill. I was like, and I think in the podcast he was like, start off a minute slower, and I was like, don't do that. It's like you
Yeah,
don't need
I
to start
was
off a
not a
minute
fan
slower.
of his pace adjustments. I was like, at some point, you got to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
Uh,
But yeah, and a big thing with any type of training, but I think especially marathon training is what I told her. I was like, you know what it feels like, run by feel. When I did Mesa, I think the only time I looked at, at the very beginning, I think I checked my watch maybe around half mile just to make sure I wasn't going too crazy on the start. And then after that, it was just when my watch would beep, I would glance at it, and really, I didn't really take even much feedback. It was just kind of like, oh, okay. And then I'd keep going. And it was just running by feel. It wasn't constant checking the watch. And, my watch has a setting where I can go look at the lap split, which would probably be, something where you can look and be like, okay, this quarter I'm already at 130. I'm on 6 minute pace, and I never set it to that because I don't want to get that granular on the marathon. I think that that's just probably too much. And she was same way. She was just like, no, I'm not going to be sitting there just staring at my watch, running by feel. And I'm glad that she had the opportunity to go out there and race. And it was insane to when they were like, she's in second place, and they would announce it, and I was just feel like, all right, like, come on. And she was running well under pace for a lot of the race, and just doing some crazy things. And yeah, that last hill is it's diabolical. It's kind of funny because Louisiana Marathon, for those who may not be in the know, there's kind of some um, injury attorneys in Louisiana that have like a bunch of commercials and stuff to the point where now they're like essentially jokes. And so one of them, can't remember if it's Gordon McKiernan or if it was Morris Bart, but one of them, there's an overpass at Louisiana Marathon. It's really kind of the only hill, and you go over like a little overpass. It probably gains, I don't know, 20 to 50 feet of elevation. It's not much, but it's at mile 25. And one of those attorneys bought a billboard and stuck it right there. And it said, a hill at mile 25 of the marathon, you might be entitled to compensation. And so that's all I could think of. I was like, man, this one's like at mile 26, there's a hill. Like, it's, you finish this and then you just get to kick it in for the finish. So yeah, interesting course design. But, yeah, it was very cool to get to watch that. I know when she was running Boston, I had it on, but Boston was going to be following, the elites race there, so you weren't really getting to see a ton of kind of the people running back around the 240 and stuff like that. But this was such a cool experience. Congratulations to Allison. Congratulations to you, and what a cool thing, and I can't wait to see her. And she still did not wear super shoes. Am I right? I was looking at the shoes. She took a picture with her kit.
she told me she was going to wear Vaporflies, but I didn't notice one way or the other.
Maybe they were.
If she did, I mean, it would be nice at some point if we pick a course that says it is a fast course. Maybe if we can get fast shoes and a fast course, like who knows what we can get out of that deal. But she has
Hey,
definitely picked two of the more challenging courses in
she
existence.
can do California International Marathon with me in December. That's always a fast course. I think one year they had a group of men pace a 2:37 group, which is the women's Olympic trial standard. So they
Oh wow.
actually had a group of guys pace that so that the women could run off of them. So
Well, in 2027, we're going to have to find that group of people
there we
somewhere so
go.
we can make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good deal. Well, yeah. Otherwise, you spent Friday night and Saturday in old Music City,
Yeah.
Nashville, at the Vanderbilt, getting to see some indoor races. So, tell us a little bit how'd Gabe do? He did the mile and the 800. Is that correct?
Yeah, he did the mile and the 800. It's a unique course. Here in Louisiana, we only have two indoor courses, LSU and McNeese. LSU is a 200-meter flat course. Um, Not really, a track that's designed for you to run super, super fast on. It does have a decent surface, but it's very, very tight curves. And then McNeese, I call it the gladiatorial arena. It's on the second floor. It is almost more of a circle than an oval there, and the fans sit right on the track. I can walk out and coach in lane 2, and so both of those tracks kind of have their place. But over at Vanderbilt, we had a 300-meter track, so it was
Oh, wow.
yeah, although it wasn't banked, it was way less aggressive on the curves, which made for a pretty good way to get to run. A little bit wider track than the 200-meter tracks. It was odd because every event started in some location that was not, the start finish line, and they put the bleachers are on the infield, facing out, so you actually have a hard time seeing a lot of the race.
Yeah.
They have a jumbotron where you can watch stuff on the back half, but otherwise you got to be pretty mobile to go see what's going on. But Gabe ran the mile on Friday night. He dropped his mile PR by a second, so he's at 4:21 for the full mile. Came back in the 800 the next day, ran 1:56.
Man.
Felt pretty good about that. He had not done that double in that order yet this year. I think he likes that order a little bit more than the 800-mile double that he did a couple weeks ago. But still a learning environment for him. Still kind of figuring things out. It's always interesting when you got to remind yourself that like you're really back to being a freshman again. Instead of being 14 running against 18-year-olds, now you're 18 running against 22, 23-year-olds.
26-year-olds in some cases.
You know, and but I think he's learning a lot, and I think every race is something where you get to learn something. It was really wild. There were 3 Louisiana coaches' kids were at that meet racing. So Coach Witt that used to coach at Ruston, now is at Scotlandville. His son was in the 800. Miguel Becerra, his daughter ran the 800. I guess if you're a coach's kid, you're an 800-meter runner. It would seem. But he coaches at St. Thomas Aquinas. She runs for Jacksonville State out of Florida, and so it was really cool seeing them there. ULL was there, so we had UNO was there. We had a huge Louisiana presence there with people, probably 30 plus athletes that went to high school in Louisiana that were kids I got to like coach against, and stuff. And so it was really cool getting to see all those people and everything. So I was very, very happy for that. And very, very happy to get to see Gabe. He's been gone for about a month and a half now from Christmas break, and it was good to catch up.
Yeah.
So,
Good deal.
but,
What conference is Arkansas State in?
Arkansas State is in the Sun Belt,
Okay.
and they so we'll get to see them race against ULL and ULM actually next week on Monday and Tuesday, and so that's going to be interesting. Their conference meet is going to be in Birmingham, and so they have a Monday Tuesday race in Birmingham, and prelims in the DMR on Monday. I know Gabe's going to be doing the 800. He might be in the DMR as well. It's kind of all hands on deck on that day.
Okay.
And yeah, so that's one that we're real excited about. If you're a freshman getting to run conference, that's always a really cool thing to be able to be a part of. And he'll get to see a lot of familiar faces to race against because that conference is filled with people that raced in Louisiana against him in high school. And so real excited about that. And then we'll transition to outdoor. Outdoor conference going to be a little bit different. It's at Appalachian State.
Oh, Boone.
So I'm not sure we'll be making it to watch that particular meet, but very, very excited to see what happens when he gets on the outdoor track,
Yeah.
as well. So just really, really cool. Really, really good experience across the board. I think he's in the perfect program for him. They took a couple of guys to Boston this weekend. They had a guy that broke the conference record, broke the school record in the 5K. I think he ran like 13:28.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he's an absolute monster. And stuff. So it's an exciting place to be. It's an exciting time to be there, and definitely pumped for Gabe.
Was that at the Valentine Invitational or whatever it was
It
called?
was at the Valentine Invitational. I guess that's
Oh,
where dreams come true.
that's right. I was about to say, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe another record went down at the Valentine Invitational.
I believe several did. LSU's all-time mile record went down. Most people
Oh,
probably didn't hear that this weekend, but
no, I bet not.
LSU had an athlete run 3:55 for the
Wow.
mile and broke that record. Your friend stickers on there somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so they had a sophomore, God bless that kid, that ran 4:01
Oh,
for his PR. So yeah, that was a little while. But I think you're thinking of a different record, and I think this was the most upset Gabe was about not getting to go to Boston with his teammates. They sent four Arkansas State boys to Boston, and while we were at Vanderbilt, they started texting Gabe pictures of them standing beside the track with a brand new world record holder, Mr. Grant Fisher.
that's
Uh,
right.
yeah, with was it 12:44 for the
I,
indoor 5K?
I believe so. Absolutely insane. And Fisher has been on an absolute tear. I believe he set, was it the 3,000 indoor
The
world
three
record as
indoor
well?
record, yeah. So
Um, and then had another race where he, I think, narrowly missed something pretty recently as well. And so he is, you know, um, gold medalist at the, or medalist at the Olympic in 5 and 10, right?
right,
Yeah, which is the first U.S. person who's pulled a double in God, I don't know how long.
right,
And
Billy Mills.
yeah, and so I know I, he's one of those that like had a lot of talk coming in on him out of high school and stuff like that. And then I think there was a little while there where he was still an amazing runner. Don't get me wrong, but maybe not quite like hitting the hype that I think a lot of people were expecting him to. And then it's just kind of like at the Olympics and since then the guy has just been on a tear. He's just been figuring it out. As obviously his coaching's been on point, and he's gone in and done some crazy things. And so, um, yeah, absolutely insane. And it's been it's been a good week or two for world records. Another American, the Goose, Sierra the Goose, set the mile indoor world record running, I think 3:46. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I believe
And got to hold that for all of 5 days.
yeah, yeah. I got to hold that for a handful of days, and then another individual that we've talked about on this podcast, Jakob Ingebrigtsen, um, probably heard that he was probably already signed up for an indoor meet, but I'm sure that didn't hurt, and so promptly told them to set the lights on the track at world record pace. And then went out and dropped it by, I don't know if it was quite a second, around a second. He wound up running 3:45. I don't know the milliseconds on either of those, but I'm sure it was probably pretty close. So yeah, I can still say it was a world record holder, even if it was only for a temporary amount of time. But yeah, Ingebrigtsen came back, and then Saturday, I believe several hours before probably we even got up to watch Allison start running, because this took place in Europe. I can't remember exactly which course it was, but the half marathon world record was lowered, and it's getting to the point of absurdity with this half marathon world record. Um, 56 minutes and I think 47 seconds or something like that, which is almost like 13.8 miles an hour. I mean, we're flirting with 14 miles an hour for almost an hour that's being run. And I believe the I can't remember exactly the guy's name. I believe he was the previous record holder, and then someone lowered it to 57 and change, and then he came back and just dropped it down to 56:47. Uh,
Right. I
that's
think it was like a 40-second drop, like
yeah.
from the previous world record. I mean, yeah, like we're getting to the point where something is happening. Either we're shortening these courses, these super shoes are doing something, there's performance issues that could be taking place. But it's just wild. And the fact that that time has gotten down to 56 minutes, um, are we, is the sub 2 hour barrier in a real marathon officially happening like within this year? Is this what we're saying now, that we're ready for this to happen?
It's so funny because there's not as much like crossover between that and the marathon as you would think. I know if you watch the original like Breaking Two documentary, they got three individuals to come in and do it. It was Kipchoge, another guy who I don't remember, and then the third individual was the half marathon world record holder, and at the time it was 57 or 58 minutes. And I remember they were just like, we were talking to him and we're like, "Hey, how'd you feel during that?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" And they're like, what did you take in?" Like, he said, "Nothing." And it was like, oh. And they were like, this is why he's been terrible at the marathon, because he had tried several marathons and did not do very good. It's because he was used to just running the half and not taking anything. And at 56 minutes, like, you can get away with that, right?
Yeah.
Like at 2 hours and 10 minutes, or whatever he was probably running at the, which is still ungodly fast, but like he was just crashing and burning because he wasn't fueling or anything. And I think we've seen several instances where we've had really good marathoners who have not really been able to piece it together for the half, or vice versa, really good half marathoners who, when they move up, they have a difficult time. But yeah, somebody had broken it down where it was like that pace was 65 seconds per quarter for, I want to say, 18 or 19 per mile. It would have been an equivalent of like a 153, obviously, like not including slowdown, just if you doubled it, like a 153 full. And so you're like, I mean, if people, we're now having multiple people run under 58. I think typically what they say for like the elite level marathoners is double your half marathon time and add 4 minutes, and that's your marathon time. So if you have guys running 58 minutes, then that's 2 hours right there if you double it and add four. So I'm with you. I'm kind of baffled. I think super shoes has a lot to do with it, of course. I think
But
recovery stuff has a lot to do with it.
I mean, we're talking about a 4:19 per mile performance. You're talking about winning most collegiate races of 5K and 10K multiple times throughout that marathon.
Oh, it was 20. It was 26:35, I think. I know
Yeah.
it was 26, which, like, how many times do you see a 10K go under 27? There's times at the Olympics where we don't see it go under
Right.
27 minutes because obviously they're not going for a world record. It's kind of a tactical race. But yeah, I mean, 26 something for 10K, and then turn around and do it again, and then you still got some to run. You
Right.
know, I mean, it's kind of crazy, and that's something we've talked to. I was talking about this at work with some people the other day, where we were talking about races and stuff coming down, and I think a lot of it can be contributed to super shoes. I think, a lot of it, somebody does it, like we talked about with like the sub 4 mile, like somebody did it and then it opens the floodgates, right? People are like, oh, it can be done. You just need that one person to do it. And then a whole bunch of people start going and doing it. And, I hope it's not drugs. I've been known to have a little bit of a cynical outlook on some of these performances where people, drop 40 seconds off at halftime and you're like, that's suspect at the very least. But I think a lot of it comes down to recovery and improved technology. Something I was talking about with someone, big fan of, I know we've talked about in our old podcast a little bit, The Last Dance, the documentary on the Bulls and their final season, really Michael Jordan's entire career. And I know there's always, the argument of like LeBron or Michael Jordan. And I'm firmly in the Jordan camp. I think LeBron definitely has longevity and some other stuff, but a point I always make to people is I'm like, think about how much better, like LeBron is, don't get me wrong, a freak of nature and an amazing, a gifted athlete and incredibly talented, but like the technology and shoes and recovery and just the knowledge that we have, even if there's a scene in The Last Dance where it's Jordan's final season and he's going to play his last game in Madison Square Garden. And he puts on like the Jordan 1s, which were like the shoe that was originally made for him, probably in like 1989 or 90. And so you're talking about a difference of 6 or 7 years, and he finishes the game and he's going, like, he's sitting on the trainer's table and his feet are bloodied and he's just like, these shoes suck, man. He's like, these shoes, like, they're terrible, like my feet hurt so bad. And that was just a difference of like 1990 to 96. My dates are probably off by a year or two, but you think like from like 96 to like 2016 or so, when LeBron's kind of in his heyday. I'm sure that there's, 2010 to 2020, LeBron's in his heyday if he's still not. But how much has shoe technology improved since then? How much has recover, they didn't have Normatec boots when Jordan was playing basketball, and so that carries over to any sport. That carries over to high school, to college. I think coaching is improving. We're just continually finding this knowledge, and we're able to apply it to groups of individuals. And I think you're seeing that with success of programs like BYU and NAU and things like that, where they're kind of like figuring out, hey, this works. And they're not doing things that different from what most coaches are doing,
Right.
but they found just that little extra 5%. And 4 or 5%, when you're looking at a 2 hour race, that's a lot
Well,
of time.
yeah, I mean, even a 4 or 5% increase in the mile, when you break it down to terms of seconds, I mean, is a huge deal.
Yeah.
I think all of these coaches at this point are looking to try to find, really and truly at this point, probably a 1% gain over other people.
Yeah.
But a 1% gain is the difference between the podium and not the podium.
Mm.
At this point, and in fact, I mean, Nike's all on board. They BYU's Diljit Taylor that coaches the women, and NAU's Mike Smith, are going to be the new coaches of Nike's newest team, Team Swoosh, I
Yeah.
believe is what they're called.
And you're leaving out the third, our boy Schumacher.
Oh yeah, over at Oregon, and stuff, and so they get. I know Mike Smith's not going to be doing NAU anymore, but the rest of them get to keep their college gig while they're doing it because you know, in Nike's mind, they're betting on the fact that those coaches have found that 1%,
Yeah.
and it's hard to argue against that when you see the performances that these athletes are doing. You know, I will say too, before we end this podcast, there is a lot to be said for the longevity of having a coach too. Grant Fisher actually went back to his high school coach to work with him. And you look at the athletes that Mike Smith is coaching. He's invested in those guys for a long period of time. And I think that's one of the things too. If if a coach can kind of get all your nuances and stuff and can see your training year after year after year, they can make small adjustments to hopefully get those 1% gains. And a lot of people are constantly looking for where the grass is greener, and I'm going to change coaches and I'm going to change programs. And we look at a lot of people who are on their third or fourth coach, they're trying to make it professionally. And you're just wondering, like, well, this person had so much talent, what's going on here? And, so I do think that, people need to make a long-term investment in their coaches. And, and when you get that, you're going to get gains, now, is it always going to be smooth? Absolutely not. There's going to be
Yeah.
some times where things are a little rough. There's some injuries and things that people just can't, avoid, but you start to learn how to communicate those things and what those things look like and what to expect. I mean, heck, I'm not your coach, but I'm definitely your sounding board. And, us being together for all these years, it makes it pretty easy when something is off in your training for me to be like, hey,
Yeah.
we've been through this before, buddy. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it. And I think, for coaching and for training, and this is one of the big, and it took me so long to learn. And if you're 16, 18, 20, 26, and you're listening to this, please, for the love of God, pay attention to this part, because, like, again, one of the things I talked about, and I made an Instagram post about it. I didn't run my first road marathon until I was like 31, because I just kept waiting and waiting. And I had some decent training in my early to mid 20s coming out of college. But I thought about training in terms of days and weeks. It was just like, oh, I got 3 weeks to this race, or I've got, and really and truly, and it's very tough, especially when you're younger, to get this. And now I fully get it. I'm thinking in years, I mean, months for sure, but in terms of years. And I think that you got to think about that with a coach as well. And that's what the coach is thinking about. You get a freshman in, you're typically not thinking like, here's how good this kid can be in 3 months at the state cross country meet. You're like, man, what can I do with this kid over 4 years?
yeah,
And that's a big part of it, is don't rush things too much, and just like start putting in the, I'm just looking at my main monitor over here, and I have two sticky notes, and one says stress plus rest equals growth, and then the other says consistency beats intensity. And I think a lot of times when you're younger, intensity, I want to go out and run this hard workout on the track, and I just want to do 3 hard workouts a week, and I'm not being consistent, but that's okay. I'll go and I'll race my fitness back in. And now it's like, I'll go and run, 3 or 4 months and not touch a race. And then, I'll have my racing season. But even some of those races I'm doing, it's just like, this is a race for fun. I'm not going out. I'm not peaking for it. It's just my
Right.
long run for the week. And so, coach, personal, whatever the case is, the longevity is something that's very important, and it's going to help you out in any sport, but distance running in particular, I think it's something that's really going to pay off dividends down the road.
I agree. Man, you are killing it with the quotes these days. These podcast quotes are home runs, sir.
That's it. All completely original too. I made these up all on my own. Uh,
Well, I do know that at some point there's a book coming from Adam Rabo, so we'll get to see some of these original quotes
that's
on,
that's
on
right.
paper.
At some point, we're working through it. But well, Falting, it's been a pleasure as always. I know you had a long day of travel, so I'm not going to keep you too much longer. I need to get out here, and I'm back to some easy training, just some 3 mile runs for kind of the rest of this week as I build back up for my marathon. But
Keep the streak.
that's it. Yeah, we're approaching 2,000. We're getting pretty close. So,
So, well, good deal. So,
all
well,
right. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. And if you haven't already, give us a follow on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. You can also find our podcast as well as YouTube. You can find it on Spotify and iTunes. The Wisdom of Coaches and Legacy Track Club. So thanks, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.